Hey, welcome to the For Evansville podcast. I'm John, and I'm here with the rest of the full-time staff people of For Evansville, Ross and Adrienne. I think this is the first time that all three of us are on the podcast together.
It's
that's
really
kind
awesome.
of a momentous occasion, a little milestone for us.
And you're here for it. So thanks for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks for joining us and listening along with us. Maybe you've listened to several of the episodes up to this point, or maybe this is your first one, but this is kind of like a halfway point for us in our first season, and we're actually going to be shifting gears, and we'll tell you more about that at the end of this episode and the end of this conversation. But we wanted to take a few minutes to just kind of look back at the needs and dreams of the city that we have learned about so far. We've really covered over the last 5 months 5 different topics that we feel are kind of underlying issues that sort of work themselves out in a lot of different ways, contribute to either the flourishing of people in our city or areas where if somebody is facing challenges in our community, they're often tied back to these 5 different topics.
Yeah, that's right. It was really just, I don't want to say exciting. That's not the right word, but it was really nice to be able to hear from experts about these issues. And, we picked 5 that we really wanted to highlight, which were kind of based on a report that we put together a couple of years ago, and kind of said, hey, these are the 5 things that kind of bubble to the top in terms of we really want to be a city that's for everyone. We want a place where everyone has a chance to flourish. And so let's make sure our community knows as much as possible about those things. And so getting to hear from so many different experts in those areas and the things that they were doing was, I think, a couple things. One, encouraging,
Right.
informative, and also just gave us a little bit of a window in how we might be able to get involved in some of those issues, or just maybe being more for Evansville, contributing in some way to creating the kind of city we want to see. Yeah.
And they're big enough categories that I think it's easy for people to find a place where they can get started in, they're so broad that there are lots of different things going on in each of these categories. But identifying these 5, we hope has helped people say like, okay, one of these 5 is sticking out to me more than the others. And I have kind of a starting place where I can begin to explore. I can begin to meet people who are working on this, or visit an organization that's working on this problem, and find an opportunity to get involved, whether that's through something as simple as volunteering or something a little more involved or integrated into their everyday life.
So let's recap what those categories actually are. If you haven't been able to join us for the whole time, just go through those really quick. In February, we kicked off racial unity. This is a quiz for any. I just made this a quiz.
Maybe too.
Right. So I was like, what's March? Why don't somebody else take it?
March, I believe we went to child welfare next.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that was the second one.
And child welfare, we actually had not only 4 experts, but we brought in some others in between in those episodes because child welfare was such a huge topic. And so there's a bunch of great work going on there, but also a lot of ways to get engaged.
Yeah. And then after that, I think the next one was housing. And talking about how housing is such an integral part of flourishing in a city. It's the place that you belong. It's the place that is really, I think one of our guests said that it's like the soil. A tree or a plant can't survive without a place to be rooted in, and housing is really like the soil for your life. It provides stability, and without it, your life is just chaotic.
Right.
And then after that, it was...
You know what? We failed. We failed the quiz.
We already
missed
failed
one.
the quiz.
Right.
So if you were listening along with us, you probably already knew that, but mental wellness was in
Came
March.
before housing.
Yeah.
That's
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That's right. And then we did child welfare, and then we did housing.
That's right.
And we just wrapped up with
Economic
capacity. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there they were, the 5 issues that we've highlighted, and each one of them has 2 episodes and at least 4 experts kind of talking through those things, understanding the issue, but also thinking about strategies that we're currently doing or what may need to happen to
Right.
continue improving in those areas. So it was really enlightening. And I thought we could take some time just to maybe share from our perspective, like what did we pull away from that as we think about the 10 episodes as, taking them all in at one time, what sticks out? What are some of the key things that we felt maybe were some of those underlying kind of systemic root issues that we could get toward, or just what's the thing you're still thinking about after listening to some of those episodes?
Yeah, I think one thing that stuck out to me was how connected they feel. After hearing from each expert in the area, they all kind of mentioned another one that we were tackling, and it just seemed like they were all more connected than I would have realized, because it just seems like we picked 5 things. But when we started diving into them, it was like, well, actually, mental wellness sometimes affects child welfare or even housing, and or lack of housing, or your certain upbringing is impacted. It impacts your mental wellness later on, those sorts of things. And so it's really interesting to me, or even the economic development that has a lot to do with the racial unity in our city. And so it was just really interesting how they're all connected for me.
There's like no isolated issue.
Right.
Right, they all touch, but one of the interesting things that Jonathan would always point out was that a root of all the issues is
isolation.
Yeah.
And as you were talking about, I was just thinking about that again, that in all of these situations and all of these topics, the different ways that they work themselves out, we often see that people who are struggling in our community are isolated. They don't have a support system of people, friends, neighbors who have the capacity to really help them succeed. And kind of points to this picture of what is a city, what is a flourishing city? It's one that's integrated, where people have strong community and relationships, and that there's this network of people who are willing to help each other out and stuff. And another thing that I've kind of seen surface throughout those is that there's also kind of, in all of these topics, a big systemic level to the challenge that is like, on one level, there's something that everybody can do to be part of the solution, especially whenever we talk about isolation being a big part of it.
Right.
Like if you'll just get close to someone who is struggling in this area and then be willing to sort of figure it out,
Yep.
how you can help them or do whatever you can, then that will help in some way. But there's also this systemic level to it that, like, you getting close to someone isn't going to solve the barriers to racial unity, or isn't going to solve the housing crisis that our community at large is facing. And so there's kind of this tension between, like, there's opportunities for all of us to be part of the solution and to find a place to get involved, but we also have to be sort of connecting with each other as we do that, because my efforts as an individual aren't going to solve the problem as a whole. There has to be like some systemic changes as well. And we have to figure out, like, what are the leverage points that are going to change the big picture reality. And that's, I think, where kind of the collaboration piece is so important, because even a single organization by itself is probably not going to shift the system. But if we can all kind of look at it together and identify, like, okay, where do we have an opportunity to make those shifts and changes in the system, and how can we work together on those things, then in a broad way, in a big picture, long-term solution, I think we begin to see more results there as well. So
Yeah, one of the things that strikes me when you're talking about that, I'm thinking about the questions we asked every guest, hey, when did you realize you were for Evansville?
yeah,
And if we have more and more people that are figuring out, okay, I want to be for Evansville, I want to contribute, not only will they most likely end up being more present and available to people around them and wanting to kind of get engaged in that way, but they'll also be more creative, more invested in figuring out, okay, I want to help my city be better. Here's something I'm good at. I see a missing link
Mhm.
And so I want to participate in doing something. And I think that's kind of the mentality we're trying to get toward in our podcast. Yeah, we want to definitely say here's all the needs and dreams that we're facing, and that we want to be as a city. But we're also trying to help people kind of shift their mentality from being in Evansville to being for Evansville. And that's kind of where we're going as well. And it's kind of exciting for me because I don't get to do any of the hosting and interviewing in these next episodes, and I get to be a listener alongside everyone else, as Jonathan and Adrienne are kind of taking on the rest of the season, and talking to specific individuals who are contributing and being for Evansville in their own unique expression of that. So, can you guys kind of fill us in, like what's coming up that you're
Yeah.
excited about?
I think one of the really hopeful things about the last couple of episodes or this kind of first half of the season was that all of these people we brought in like the experts on the topics, but it wasn't that they were just experts. What really stood out to me is they really love Evansville and
Mhm.
they're
Hmm.
working really hard to make it a better place to live, and it's not just their job for them. It's their passion, and they love Evansville. And one of the things I was either struggling with or wrestling with is these are great people to look up to aspire to be like, but not everyone can be in these high level positions. So, how do we make this more accessible to our listeners who want to make a difference but can't necessarily see themselves in those positions? And so, we wanted to bring in people who are just kind of on the ground saying, hey, I have a passion in this area, and this is what I'm doing in that in my everyday life, whether it is my job or it is my free time or I do this with my family, those sorts of things. And we really wanted to bring you guys along with us in that journey of just discovering who are the people that live in Evansville, but also live for Evansville.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've already had a number of those conversations that we've recorded and we'll be editing and releasing as episodes. And we've had a lot of really exciting conversations that we've
Yeah.
really enjoyed a lot.
Yes.
One of my favorites was talking to Randy Hobson from Pangea and Second Language, two really great restaurants, and just kind of hearing how like something like a restaurant can impact a city and a community in more ways than you might think. Like it's not just
Hmm.
about having access to great food. Like there's a lot more to it, and I really enjoyed hearing that in our conversation with him. Another guest runs an Instagram account and is leveraging that Instagram account for the good of our community and stuff. And so I'm excited for us to be able to release some of those conversations and get people to think creatively and maybe a little more outside the box of what does it mean to be for Evansville and what does it mean to contribute to the flourishing and the good of our community. And one of the things that has stuck out to me as we've had those conversations is this idea that loving your city often manifests itself as loving your neighbor. That like whenever we talk about loving your city, we're not really talking about the place as much as the people that have made this place their home. And it's been cool to kind of hear that in a bunch of unique, different ways, that there are all these different ways that your passions and your skills or your position in the city can give you unique opportunities to love your neighbors in unique ways. And that it's in that love of your neighbor that you're loving our city and that you're helping our city to flourish and become a place where everyone can flourish.
Right. And I think you brought up a great point of their passions aligning, and you don't have to change the whole trajectory of your life to try to solve these problems. It's more like you've been equipped, or you've been given these specific gifts and talents, whether that's through your schooling or education, or just even the placement where you are in the city or your job, any sorts of things like that. It's more like, okay, where am I at now, and how can I use that to contribute in my own unique way? So it's more just shifting your thinking into being for Evansville rather than I have to like change or use all my extra time.
That's
That
a good
kind of
point.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, I'm excited to sort of listen into those conversations and even see how somebody's using their hobby or their work or just a passion that they have for meeting some of these needs we've just highlighted. I think that's going to be really fun to see how those things overlap and would help us envision what could this look like in my life? Like what are you good at? What are you excited about? What do you care about seeing in our city? And that these stories could inspire you to maybe take that next step in what that could look like in being for Evansville. And I don't want to lose sight of the kind of city we hope Evansville can be. And the way we say that for Evansville is we want to see the Evansville region even be a place where every person experiences love and gives love, a place where every person prioritizes the holistic well-being of all people, and where everybody has work that provides community value and individual purpose. And that's a lot of words. But if we can put those three ideas together, we really feel like that's a compelling place to live. That's the kind of place I think most people would say that would be a great city to live in.
Right.
But maybe that first one is something that we've really tried to focus on, is we want every person to experience love and give love. And we're talking about isolation and ways that even systemically people maybe don't feel loved. I think that's a root thing that we can focus on. So caring for your city might look like loving your neighbor. Defining who your neighbor is might be a really important part of that conversation as well. So it'll be really neat to see how you guys have talked through these conversations with people who are for Evansville and how they're caring for their neighbors, how they're shaping their lives around being for Evansville.
Yeah. We hope you'll continue to listen along with us and enjoy those stories. And in the meantime, if you're thinking, man, I've listened to all of these big topics and I want to think about how can I be for Evansville, one of the things that we've been working on is putting together challenges that kind of give you a first step or maybe a few different first steps to begin to experiment with, like, okay, how can I explore this topic more? So you can find those on our website, forevansville.org/challenges. We're working on having at least one for each of the topics that we've covered so far. And they'll have really practical first step type things that you can do to begin to explore getting involved in those opportunities. And the hope really is that those would lead to, sort of a longer discovery process of figuring out, like, oh, I'm beginning to see some ways that my life can align with addressing some of these challenges.
So is there anything else that we should know as we're getting ready to listen to the next, 10 or so episodes?
Yes, if you are listening and you would love to see our faces, but more importantly, the guest faces, you want to put a face with a name, you can now join us on YouTube and you can watch our episodes there as well. So if you are listening and want to see us, then you can tune in on our YouTube channel for Evansville.
Yeah, and I would say too, if you're maybe just checking us out and don't really know anything about For Evansville yet and just found our podcast, another thing that we've done in the past is short films and tried to just tell stories about the kind of city we want to live in and the city that we are kind of living in now. And so you can check those out on our website as well. And we'd love for you to, check them out, share them around, and hopefully inspires you to continue moving in this direction, being for Evansville.
Yep. If you have a story that you'd like to share with us or that you think might be a good fit for our podcast, we'd love to hear about that too. You can reach out to us through email at info@forevansville.org or find us on Facebook and Instagram at For Evansville. We'd love to hear how you're thinking about being for Evansville, or if you're listening from another city, even telling us what maybe that looks like in your city. But we're always trying to listen as an organization. It's a key value of ours. We think it's important to our mission to help bring people together to solve our city's most pressing needs. We want to be talking to people. We want to be hearing individual stories as well as the story of our city from a bunch of different angles. And hopefully you've enjoyed being included in that listening through this podcast, and will continue to listen and learn along with us.